Hello and welcome to the Living Organization podcast. My name is Vitaly Gieman, and this is a place where we look at the living organization, a new way of seeing organizations, a new way of leading organization, and most importantly, a new way of achieving results. And today we're actually looking at that last part. How do we achieve better results? How do we achieve improved productivity organization? And once again, we have Norman Wolfe. Norman, welcome.
Thank you, Vitaly. It's always a pleasure to have these conversations with you.
Oh, I loved last time we talked about how do we improve results and particularly strategy execution, why the 70% of strategy execution fail. And so today I wanted to go a little bit deeper and specifically into this area of productivity improvement because a lot of executives concern, particularly today where we know such a volatile world with so many variables, is that their productivity improvement is decreasing. So I'm going to do something different. Usually I kind of interview people and ask them questions, which I still will. But what I want to do is explain to me how I understand the living organization improves productivity, given that, I've been actually involved for a while with the living organization. And maybe you can correct me or maybe I'm missing something. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, let's play. Let's have
Okay.
fun.
Okay, great, great. So here is how I understand it. Um, I found that you have this formula called the productivity improvement or output of the organization is equals to capability plus maturity development. Is
Yeah,
that a good
yeah,
summary?
yeah. We call it the capacity. So mostly the capacity to execute, capacity to achieve outcomes is a function of the capability and the maturity. Yep.
Okay, okay. Capacity, yeah. So let's equate capacity. Well, obviously, to improve productivity, you need a certain level of capacity. So the two correlate. So that a lot of OD consultants, a lot of human resource managers already focus on capability improvement. That's their job, right?
Yeah. Oh,
So what I understood is usually that capability improvements involve technical training skills. We
right.
sometimes we call hard skills, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
um, soft skills, in terms of
Yep.
communication, collaboration skills,
Right.
empathy, and so on. And we put the two together, the technical training, the professional training skills together with soft skills, and we say we're good to go. We should be able to have a very productive individual or productive organization, right?
Yeah, except mostly when people think of productivity, they're thinking dominantly about the hard skills. So let's give a little background. Maybe this will help. Um, so productivity is typically the calculation for productivity is revenue per person, something along those lines, right? Um, or widgets per person or widgets per hour. But you can think of it, widgets per hour is assumed that a person has a 40-hour week and they produce widgets, right? And so the productivity is how many widgets can you produce in that time frame. The productivity of the organization is how many widgets all the people produce in that time frame. So productivity is really a measure of how much work can you get done. And that's valid. And traditionally, when people think of productivity, they think of it as simply um, the amount of work a person does, which is not a bad measure. And that's often the amount of skills they have. So how fast can I make a widget, right? If I can make a widget faster, then I have higher productivity. So typically when you were saying, you combine hard skills and soft skills, when people think of productivity, they don't think of soft skills. They don't think of communications and interaction skills and EQ. That's something that's usually kept in a different bucket, right? Under people development and so forth, but it's never really integrated into the hard skills side of things.
Okay.
And the reason we came up with that formula of capacity or productivity equals capabilities plus maturity is to integrate the two. If you don't integrate the two, then you're really getting a lopsided equation. And it relegates individuals to simply, how do I want to say, simply into a component part on the machine, right? So if a person isn't quote unquote productive, what I have to do is tweak them, fix them, to adjust them so they become more productive. And again, I'm looking at activity-based stuff, which what they produce as the key measure. Now, don't get me wrong. I also agree with that formula for the most part. I modify it a little bit. I say productivity is really a value divided by effort. Right. And so revenue per person equals revenue is equal to the value we create. So revenue and value could be correlated. And hours could be correlated to effort. So it's not really saying it differently, but I find that saying it, productivity is value per effort. It changes the way we look at how we get more value for the effort we put in. And that allows us to combine maturity and capability. So maybe I should define maturity for you a little bit.
Yeah, please. If or actually, maybe let
Oh.
me define it, and let's see if I got it wrong. How I can get it wrong.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
because remember, I wanted to practice this.
And so it's a learning opportunity for everybody, you and the audience as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So now this is my very layman's attempt at maturity. So maturity, I define as something as basically how it's not just the technical capability, but the ability of a person to be part of the team dynamics, to contribute as a valuable member of the organization, right? And understand the dynamics organization so that they can be a productive, collaborative team member, right?
Yep.
Now that's just one, but that's just one level of productivity as a team member. But then another level is how do they understand the kind of the whole the systemic complexity of organization, how one thing
Yep.
affects everything else. And the other
Yep.
factor is do they understand the customer and outside environment, how that impacts. So it's maturity and understanding the bigger picture, the CEO picture, the board of director
Yep.
picture, even though they might not be at that level, but they understand the wider implications of the environment on the organization and be able to support that and be able sometimes even sacrifice part of themselves for the good of the whole. I mean, that's my
Right.
lane.
You're right. You're on the right track. As a matter of fact, you're spot on. You missed one slight additional component that we have. So there's three components we look at for defining the maturity of an individual. And by the way, just to remind you in the audience, when I say individual, I'm always looking at a single individual or a collective of people as an individual. Because within our approach, what we've recognized is that a collective of people actually operates like an individual as well. So you can look at the maturity of your sales department, not just the individuals within it, but the collective as a whole. And maybe in another session, we can dive into that in more detail. So the maturity of an individual, single person or collective, is it got three components. One is you mentioned being able to see the big picture, right? And being able to deal with the complexity and uncertainty that surrounds us. The second one you mentioned is what we call the interrelationship skills, their ability to interact, whether it be internally or externally. How well can they interact and not just be locked into certain ways of thinking about what's right and wrong and the way people behave. So and then the third one, and I'll come back to these and give you some examples of how they play into productivity. And the third one is how quickly can a person develop themselves, right? Which has to do with their ability for self-reflection, for learning from mistakes, from expanding their perspective on right and wrong, and things along those lines. So those are the three elements. So you got two of the three correct. The one you
Hey,
left out
all
was
right. Okay.
the individual, yeah, the individual development piece of it, or we call self-reflection or growth. You can look at it. Um, so yeah, let me give you a couple of examples of why it's important. Let me also go back a step first before I do that. One of the things that um, we ignored is uh, how did we get to this place of um, productivity being dominantly focused on the capability to produce? If you put a person in a very well-defined environment that is repeatable, in other words, I'm going to be on a production line, and my job is to um, is make sure all of this stuff going down the production line is good quality. Or if I'm on a production line and my job is to um, uh, place this component on that board, something along those lines, where it's highly repetitive task, or I'm on a sewing machine sewing, so many garments. The amount of interaction that person has with the environment, with situations, with other people is very low. And so it makes sense to have productivity be measured by how many widgets they do. In the early days of my career, I actually measured management productivity by what do managers produce. So they produce decisions. So how many decisions can they make in a day is the function of productivity. And all of that is function on their capability. And as long as the environment was fairly stable and people's job was well defined, that's okay. But as you pointed out, the other elements of productivity, um, things like interaction with others, with customers, and so forth, right? So that becomes a maturity situation, right? Because my ability to interact with customers. So my ability to get work done is now not just about producing a thing, a widget, a decision, a design, whatever. My ability to be effective to produce value, and that's why I use value or revenue or effort. My ability to produce that value is a function of how well I can interact with others, as well as how well I can produce a report, right? And so my skill set in that area now has to be included in the productivity development equation. So I'll give you an example. I have a client who's got a director of sales who, in all rights, because of the nature of this company, should be the next CEO of the company, because the CEO usually comes up through that rank because of the nature of the company. And this guy is brilliant. I mean, he is absolutely, his mind is quick. He can calculate things in his mind. He's got great product. The sales process is like an arbitrage process. So he can trade off risk assessments very, very quickly. And he knows the game. He's got absolutely very poor interrelationship skills. He's even got so his ability to lead an organization. The CEO literally said to me the other day, he said, I cannot imagine him taking over. What that would do to this company would be disastrous. Right? So how is this guy going to develop if it's not developing his um, capabilities in other dimensions than his technical skills? And he relies heavily on his technical skills for success. And you might ask, well, that's great. That affects his promotion, but how does that affect productivity? Well, everybody that works with him, that collaborates with him, struggles getting anything done because of his style of collaborating, which is very mechanical, very technical. So there's no fluidity in relationship, right? Um, Setting a strategy, he struggles with setting a strategy because everything has to be well defined. So he's in a little box. So if we were to evaluate his maturity, his ability to see the big picture and to deal with uncertainty is very low, right? And so how can he work with others, and how can they produce more work together if his interactions is always slowing it down? So that's just one example. I've got dozens of them, but we only have so much time.
Wonderful. Yeah. So I totally understand. So let me have a go at how I would approach this individual. And
Yeah,
because I'm sure the audience says, I say, okay, we've got the definitions, what it is, but how do you actually get the job done and give me
sure.
productivity? So my guess
Go
is
for it.
what you would say, and my guess is we take this individual, we don't send him onto a workshop or maturity development workshop because that's been done before. He comes back the same person. We actually work with him on the job to see what problems, if he's open to. I mean, if he's actually coachable, that we give him an executive coach, we give him a productivity coach, whatever you want to call him, but we guide him in closing that gap in maturity, which he has to recognize himself first, and be willing to actually work on that on the job. Would that be correct? Kind of in the short.
Yeah, the short version is you're correct. And there's just, I would say one nuance to that. When working with somebody in their maturity, you got to understand that their level of development is a function of their sense of self-identity. So you're 100% correct. But what we want to do is help him see how his strength is also his weakness, like his strong orientation to having everything quantitative and numerical, because that's the way he processes information because of his position of risk management, um, is also his weakness. So we want to help him bring forward his strength, not lose his strength. In other words, we don't want to make him wrong and tell him he has to change who he is. That will never work or work very poorly. We have to um, uh, I call it add on to and expand. Bring what's good about him forward into the future and add on to it another skill set so that he can feel good about his sense of identity doesn't go away. His sense of identity has to be expanded and enhanced. So um, just a little nuance to what you were saying. But yes, it's a combination of coaching and also getting the organization to support him, like have his peers learn how to peer coach him. So there's a whole combination of things. If you think about how people develop maturity in general, you've got to give them experiences where they can challenge what they think is their core belief system in a way that allows them to expand their core belief system.
Perfect. Yeah, I understand. I understand. It's not going against the ego. It's actually acknowledging for who they are and building them up to a whole new level of competency and maturity. And most people, most reasonable people say, yeah, sure, let's have a go. Let's see if I can stretch. And those who don't, well, you can't do nothing. Okay, well, thank you. I think that's really great. It's wonderful. Where can people find you, and how would they interact with you if they needed to talk about productivity improvement or maturity development?
Anytime anybody wants to talk to me, I love conversing, as you can tell. Um, our website, quantumleaders.com, or you can write me email, nwolfe, that's NWOLFE at quantumleaders.com.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you so much for today's. I felt I learned as well, and I'm sure the audience
Good.
have.
Great. Thanks, Vitaly, for having me again.